I would do anything, absolutely anything, to go back to the moment in time when I first heard Wizkid's Made in Lagos. Take me back. Because you see that album alongside Burna Boy's African Giant, it shifted something. It shifted something not only in me, but in the world and the landscape of music in general. Let me take you back to the year 2020. October the 28th, 11:58 UK time to be specific. It is 2 minutes to midnight and Wizkid is moments away from releasing his album. I want you to bear in mind that this album had been teased and anticipated for a few years at this point, and it was even further delayed from its initial release earlier in the month because of the EndSARS protest happening in Nigeria. The clock struck midnight and I pressed play on the very first song, Reckless, and when I heard that song and I heard the first bit of instrumentation, I yelled, "Hey! Hey! Hey! Wizkid, kilele, kilele," in a good way. I said, oh my God. From that very first note, from the very first sound, I knew in my heart and in my soul that this album was going to be an experience. And I was not wrong. I wasn't wrong. Ginger, Blessed, Essence, True Love, Mighty Wine, Piece of Me, Gyrate, Smile, Sweet One. Bro, how does somebody have that many bangers on one album? Just back to back to back to back to back to back. Bass balls. How does somebody do that? That's even before we get into the deluxe version, because the deluxe version, Anotti, Mood, and Steady. Steady is an underrated classic. That song makes me want to do. Anyway, this is a PG video. We'll keep it with Christ. That album for me is one of the greatest albums in the history of all music. I'm not talking about Nigerian music. I'm not talking about African music. I'm not talking about black music. I'm talking about of all time, from the start of history up until now, Made in Lagos is one of the greatest albums to ever be released. That album was significant for many reasons, and one of the reasons for me why I found it so significant was it felt like Afrobeats and contemporary African music had finally arrived on the world stage in a way that it hadn't done before. And yes, we can go back to the likes of Fela Kuti, and we can talk about the success of a song like Magic System's Premier Gawe that still gets played to this day. That song is going to get played and passed down from generations to generations. And we can even talk about songs from the modern day. There have been fleeting moments here and there. I can think about Davido's If or Davido's Fall, or we can talk about Beyonce's album that she did for The Lion King, which was heavily African influenced. We can talk about Wizkid once again with Ojuelegba, or better still, we can talk about Wizkid and Drake on One Dance. There have been moments that have popped up here and there, but for me, Made in Lagos felt like a monumental shift. African music was no longer this faraway sound that lived in the motherland. It was music that was about to define the cultural landscape of entertainment across the world and for years to come. I need you to understand that these artists were performing in their country, in their local cities, in their local towns, and they were obviously popular in the country that they were coming from. But they had gone from performing there to selling out world-renowned venues like the O2 Arena 3 times. They had gone from there to selling out 80,000-seater stadiums in London and in Paris. They had gone from that to collaborating with some of the biggest names in music and to winning Grammys. These African artists were now achieving unprecedented heights, and it filled me with immense joy and immense pride. I do want to make it clear though, and I want to make this clear from the jump. African music was already successful, whether it had American Western validation or not. American acceptance doesn't equate to success. What it did mean, it meant that a new globally dominant audience that hadn't really connected with this sound before, hadn't really connected with this particular music before, were not only listening, but paying and consuming in their millions. However, it has been a couple of years since that initial burst of success, and for me it feels like that hype and that wave has come and gone. In my opinion, just me, my opinion, you don't have to agree with me, it feels like it's slowly on the way out. It kind of feels like it's out the door already. And this tweet that I saw on Twitter the other day kind of echoes the sentiment that I've been feeling. This user says, quiet as it's kept, I think the Afrobeats and Mapiano wave is over and has been over for a while, and that's coming from somebody that loves both genres. Whether it's oversaturation or a shift in global trends or just overall fatigue with the sound altogether, it feels like Afrobeats and African music in general has gone just a little bit stale. The songs don't feel as exciting as they once did, and it feels like a lot of the mainstream and popular African artists have kind of lost their hunger. So, on today's episode of Small Talk, I'm going to attempt to answer one very simple question. Did the pandemic kill African music? Hello, what's going on? My name is Ore. I am a presenter, broadcaster, cultural commentator, and all-round creative idiot. And welcome back to another episode of Small Talk. This is where I sit in my bed and I dissect the world of news, sport, politics, music, entertainment, popular culture, and everything in between, but aim to delve that little bit deeper than beneath the surface. Alright, can I be honest with you for a second? I want to be really honest and transparent for a second. As you can tell from my accent, I'm British. I've lived in London my entire life. I was born in London. I've grown up in London. I'm a Brit. I'm also Nigerian. Let's not get into that discussion today. I say all of that to say this. Growing up in England, being African wasn't cool. I know that's not a universal experience, and I know everyone's not going to feel the same way that I felt, but I'm 29, turning 30 in a couple of days, and growing up in this country, perception-wise, being from the continent of Africa meant that people viewed you in a specific way. Wait, hold on. Why do I feel like I've said this recently? I literally spoke about this. I literally spoke about this in one of my recent videos. Roll VT. You see, there has been this image of Africans that has been portrayed in the media for many decades now. And it's this image that has followed Africans around for years and years and years, you know. It's a negative, primitive, flies around the mouth, malnourished, abject poverty image, which does exist in Africa, but that doesn't tell the full story. And the ripple effect of that imagery still reigns true today. In the UK, in the mid to late 2000s, a lot of the black cultural cachet resided with those from the Caribbean countries. The Windrush generation quite literally changed the fabric of British society through things like healthcare, workers' rights, race relation, food, music and language. Growing up in the UK and going to school in the UK, the kids were listening to things like dancehall, they were listening to reggae, to soca, to calypso, and listening to grime, which is a derivative and can be traced back to Jamaican sound system culture. And Afrobeats was there and African music was there, but in comparison, it was very much a little fish in a much bigger music pond. Well, here in the UK anyways. Now, I'm not going to give you an extensive breakdown of the rise of Afrobeats because that's not what this particular episode is about, and there are multiple documentaries out there if that is the information that you seek. But the year's about 2003. In stepped JJC and the 419 Squad. Then there was Banky W, D'banj, Two-Face Idibia, P Squared. Then there was Olamide and Don Jazzy. Then there was Wizkid. Then there was Tiwa Savage. Then there was Davido. Then there was Burna Boy. So on and so forth. You kind of get my drift. In the 2010s, the genre of Afrobeats exploded. It exploded everywhere across the world other than America. And we will get to America later in this episode. Afrobeats exploded. And I have this wild theory that I haven't really spent time actually putting together, but I have this wild theory that Wizkid's Don't Dull changed the entire trajectory of the music industry in general. I'm not even talking about African music now. Wizkid's Don't Dull changed the entire trajectory of music across the world forever. But you know what? That is a completely different tangent, and I want to talk about that on a completely separate day. Because of this explosion, Africans were beginning to produce genuine, bona fide superstars that could hold their own against some of the biggest names on the planet. And I'm going to try and do everything in my power to not refer to the big three in this particular episode. The big three being Wizkid, Burna Boy, and Davido. And I feel like the conversation's been done a million times over. It's tired, and I'm kind of over it. But this isn't me taking away from their achievements. I will never do that because we wouldn't be here without the groundwork and the foundations that those three individuals have laid. But if we are going to talk about those that are having global impact, we have to put Tems in there. We have to put Rema in there, and we most certainly have to put in Asake there too. Anyways, I digress again. Afrobeats became incredibly popular, and that was down to the internet and to social media, and it was also down to the emergence of blog sites like notjustok.com and Bella Naija. Bella Naija changed the game for weddings, for events, for anything in Nigerian popular culture. Bella Naija, yeah. Shade Room before the Shade Room even existed. Shade Borough before the Shade Borough even existed. And these guys helped to distribute the music and the culture from Nigeria beyond the continent. But also, if I want to give credit to those in Nigeria, I'm actually going to give credit to us here in the UK, because we as a diaspora, we really latched on to this new sense of African pride. And as I said earlier, it wasn't cool to be African growing up in the UK. It just wasn't. And if anyone tells you otherwise, I can't lie, they are a liar. They are a liar. Because I know loads of guys whose name was Sean. Your name is Oluwa Sean, but you're telling people to call you Sean. You're telling people to call you Sean. Sean Dapolni. I also want to write an episode about Black Brits and the Midlands University scene, because things like the ACS, African Caribbean Society, the Big Clash, or Barfest and Stamina, these events and these organizations were able to serve young first-generation African immigrants with a flavor of what was happening back home, whilst also sprinkling in a dash of British pride. And the 2013 to 2017 Midlands Uni era 1,110% boosted the African creative music economy. I stand on that. Okay, so fast forward to the end of the decade, and you would regularly find African acts performing at and often headlining some of the biggest festivals in the world. In fact, festivals like Afro Nation were created to cater to this growing Afrobeats economy. You see, music is a life cycle. Pre-2015, music was all about dance music and EDM and trap. That basically ruled what was considered pop music, popular music. But by the time you got to the year 2019, both of those genres were oversaturated and stale to the casual listener. And it's kind of what Afrobeats is experiencing right now. Because EDM and trap music was on the way out, Afrobeats provided something different, a rhythmic high. It's music that has warm bass, organic percussion, sunny keys. It was something different and a little bit refreshing. And all of a sudden, being African was not only just cool and trendy, but Afrobeats and the genre was a sound that the rest of the world felt like they had to get their hands on in fear of being left behind. Now, there are many examples of this, and it's kind of funny because it seems like every single conversation that we seem to have about music in the present day, Drake somehow seems to be at the root of it. But I want to take us back to the year 2015 when Drake jumped on the Ojuelegba remix with Skepta. Then a year later, he collaborated with Wizkid again on One Dance, and for me, that really opened the floodgates. It really opened the American Western audience into this sound that had been bubbling for years in Africa. I think that song was the first piece in a much bigger domino effect. Bro, I don't think people understand. One Dance by, and we can't forget Kyla, Wizkid, and Drake was #1 in the UK for 15 weeks. Not 1, not 2, not 5, not 10, 15 whole weeks in the United Kingdom of all places. Incredible. A song with Ayodeji Ibrahim Balogun was top of the UK charts. And yes, I know people still question Wizkid's contribution to that song, and a lot of people say that it wasn't authentic Afrobeats, but you kind of need to look at how far we had come. You light up my world, girl. You must be a superstar. Trust me, whenever I watch that video, it reminds me of how far we've come. And then in 2019, alongside the release of the new Lion King film, African music was further catapulted onto the global stage with Beyonce's release of the Lion King The Gift album, which features one of my favorite Burna Boy songs of all time. Oh my God. Sorry, I love music so much. I love African music so much. That song by Burna Boy, Ja Ara Air, I wish I could play it for you right now. I can't because of copyright restrictions. But that song That is one of one. Burna Boy put his whole foot in that mother song. The album featured the likes of Shatta Wale, Mr. Easy, Techno, Tiwa Savage, Yemi Alade, and many, many others. And I need you to remember, getting a co-sign for Beyonce is very hard to come by, but featuring on an album with her, unheard of. Very few people have that privilege, and African music as a whole was reaching new unprecedented heights, but that wasn't even close to the peak that was about to come. Okay, let's talk about let's talk about the pandemic, which is crazy because we're in 2025. The pandemic was half a decade ago. Crazy. So the year 2020 happens and the world shuts down and everyone is effectively on house arrest and they are rotting their brains watching idiots battle each other on IG Live. Shout out to Bono.
Bono, please stop posting the same fucking flag. Please stop posting the same fucking flag. Please stop posting the same fucking flag.
The world was in this very dystopian and traumatic place, and it really did feel like we were experiencing the end times. You turn on the news and it was death, recession, racism, more death, Boris Johnson, police brutality, end SARS, George Floyd. Fun. I keep saying this in all of my videos, but I really want to hammer it home. That period in human history was so deeply traumatic. I don't feel like we've all fully recovered from it. I certainly haven't. I think about the pandemic and I think about what we were experiencing, and I'm like, that was insane that we just lived through that. And a lot of us have just carried on as if that was normal. It was also really interesting to see the aftermath of the brutal murder of George Floyd and the End SARS movement happening in Nigeria at the exact same time. Abuse of power and police brutality were at the center of both protests, and people were speaking out about the same issue at the same time in two separate parts of the world. Despite the political and civil unrest, Afrobeats and the culture around Afrobeats seemed to be the antithesis to this. Afrobeats music offered this guilt-free escape, and it reminded me of this infamous quote by Fela Kuti and Anikulapo.
Music is a spiritual thing. You don't play with music. If you play with music, you will die young. You see, because when the higher forces give you a gift of music, musicianship, it must be well used for the good of humanity. If you use it for your own self by deceiving people or doing this, you will die young.
Because of its fun, soft life, loving energy, Afrobeats music subconsciously became the remedy to the doom and gloom of the world. I wrote that joke and I knew it wasn't going to bang. Rema D. I'm better than that. Okay, we just move on. We're just going to keep it moving. We were all locked in our houses and we couldn't go outside. And because we couldn't travel physically, music became cultural tourism, and Afrobeats gave non-Africans a window into the vibes on the continent without needing to get on a plane and experience it firsthand. This was an era where TikTok trends were going viral every other day and streaming surged to new levels and things just took off. The thing is, I've got so many jokes in my lock-off because I was going to do a Migos joke here, but after the Remedy one I just attempted, I don't want any of you being upset. Okay.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
And this is where we saw songs like Love Wantiti by CK, Peru by Fireboy DML, and Calm Down by Rema fly to a completely new stratosphere. Because never in a million years did I think I would see British white people saying the word Wantiti. But this was the global world that we now lived in, and I loved it. Absolutely loved it. In fact, I never thought I'd see Billie Eilish, of all people, talking about techno like this in such glowing terms.
My favorite artist is techno. There isn't one song that I don't like that he puts out. Every single song that man puts out, I love. Shouldn't that count as your favorite artist, as an artist that puts out music that you only like?
Then I started to notice a lot of American artists were listening to the sounds coming out of the continent and adopting this Afrobeats light sound to their music. Doja Cat is the prime example. I listened to a lot of Doja Cat's music from 2020, 2021, it sounds not too dissimilar to what was coming out of Nigeria at the time. And we haven't spoken about it, but let's talk about it now. Wizkid, Tems, Essence. Do you know what? I can't actually think of another song that has been released in recent years that has completely changed the direction and the trajectory of somebody's life in the way that Essence changed Tems' life. That song was everywhere. It was everywhere. It almost got to the point where you were trying to escape it. Radio, it was there. TV, it was there. TikTok, it was there. Instagram, it was there. On the toilet, it was there. Church, it was there. Kilo Day now. Essence, alongside Calm Down and songs like Last Last, gave Afrobeats legitimacy in markets where radio stations weren't actually playing their music before, and in markets where promoters and venues wouldn't have previously booked said artists. And this music was authentically Nigerian, but digestible and palatable for mainstream non-black and non-African audiences. Now, this is even before I get the chance to talk about the emergence of Asake, because that man is my GOAT. He needs to put his dreadlocks back in, but that man is my GOAT. I barely really mentioned Burna Boy, and whether you like him or not, he is most certainly one of the biggest exports to come out of Nigeria since the turn of the millennium. I haven't spoken about him. I haven't even touched on the significance and the importance of events like Dirty December or the Year of the Return, but there is so much to cover that I just can't do it all in one video. Hey, I would love for you to subscribe to the channel if you haven't done already. I'm going to try and be really strict to myself. I want to try and give you a brand new video every week, Monday night, 7 p.m. UK time, without fail. I'm really ambitious and I've got a lot of big plans and goals for this platform, and I would love for you to be part of this journey with me. And this is your space as much, well, not the bed, but this is your space as much as it's mine, and your contribution really does matter. If you have any thoughts, any ideas, any videos that you would like to see me write and talk about, let me know in the comment section. I try to read as many comments as possible and try to engage with you as much as possible. But yeah, hit the like button, make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell so you know every time I upload a video. And talking of videos, back to this one. Do you know what, yeah? Afrobeats is the perfect example of compound interest. It's the perfect example because year on year, the genre got incrementally bigger and bigger and bigger. And I know that I've only just focused solely on Afrobeats, but there are, of course, many other genres in the continent of Africa. I could have spoken about Fuji, High Life, Kwaito, Juju music, Benga, Makossa, Congolese rumba, Coupe Décalé, Afro House, and of course, how can I not talk about Amapiano, which is currently the most dominant sound, one of the most popular genres in the world right now. I hear another log drum and I hear another I'm gonna lose my mind. I'm gonna lose it. But I do want to focus solely on Afrobeats in this particular episode, and I'm just gonna speak on what I know. And the date that I'm filming this is Friday the 15th of August 2025, and I can't help but feel like something is missing from Afrobeats. I can't put my finger, well, I can put my finger on it, but it just feels like something is missing. Like every year we have a song of the summer, and this year I don't know what the Afrobeat song of the summer is. I think Ira Star's Hot Body could be that, but we're basically in autumn. Summer is technically over, so I don't know if that qualifies as being the song of the summer. In the past few years, we've had songs like Last Last, Unavailable, Lonely at the Top, Love Me Jeje, or Ozeba, which have gone on to define the sound of summer. But this year we just don't have that. And to me, that is a sign that this Afro-infused musical wave that we've been enjoying for the past couple of years is slowly creeping its way out the door for now. So earlier in this episode, I referenced a particular tweet, and I'm going to say it again because it relates to what it is that I'm about to say. This tweet says, I think the Afrobeats Amapiano wave is over and has been over for a while, and that's coming from somebody that loves both genres. They then followed up with that tweet with, it was cemented for me when Rema's Baby Is It a Crime went absolutely nowhere. And I I can't agree anymore. That tweet actually took the words right out of my mouth. Rema's Is It a Crime? Do you know what? It's a crime that that song didn't get the love that it deserved. That should have been his essence. I can't quite put into words or explain just how great, just how magnificent of a song that song is. From the sample flip to the cadence on the verses to the sexy instrumentation, that song is magical. And I know that I'm focusing solely on Afrobeats. Another song that comes to mind that should have been bigger than water. It should have been Tyler's biggest hit song, Push to Start. If you follow me on TikTok and if you follow me on social media, you would know how much I was so obsessed with that song last year. Push to Start should have been a global smash. That song is so good. What? Oh my gosh. But same again, it did okay, but it didn't have impact in a way that I believe it should have. And that once again reinforces my belief that African music is going through this lull period. And do you know what? Yeah, my conclusion is this. I think people are just bored. I think people and audiences are just bored. You see, art is cyclical. We know that. You know, things come and go, things come in and out of trend all the time, and music, of course, is no different. But I feel like there is a bit of fatigue with African sounding music, specifically in the Western markets. And if you just look at the charts right now, if you look what's popular in mainstream culture, country music is still well and truly in its renaissance period. And talking of renaissances, I want you to ask yourself this question. What genre has Beyonce currently moved on to?
Oh my God. I'd like to thank all of the incredible country artists that accepted this album.
Exactly. The thing is, Afrobeats hasn't died. It's just become commodified. And when something becomes a commodity, it loses that wild, fresh, rebellious spark that made people fall in love with it in the very first place. In fact, the underdog became the main character, and then everybody decided that it was time to move on. Do you know what? The entertainment industry does this thing that really frustrates me. It squeezes the life and the juice out of something that is clearly very popular and highly profitable, and it waters it down until there's nothing left. And all of a sudden, every label exec, every label in the world wanted an Afrobeats act, or they wanted their pop acts to have an Afrobeat artist on their remix, or they wanted to feature on a song with an Afrobeat artist. And prime example is this. I like Ed Sheeran. Heck, I was once in an Ed Sheeran music video. I've got nothing but nice things to say about that guy. But did he really need to be on the remix of Peru with Fireboy DML? I get it, commercial reasons. But from a music standpoint, was it needed? Selena Gomez on Calm Down. Once again, I get it, commercial success. One of the most streamed Afrobeat songs of all time. Make your money, Rema. Do your thing, my Benin King. But that song, the product, it felt compromised. And it just felt like it was watered down to me. I'm not asking you to agree with me. This is just my opinion. Because of this, there was a knock-on effect to the artists that were coming up out of Nigeria, and the market got flooded, and everybody felt the pressure to make this new, palatable version of Afrobeats, this watered-down version of Afrobeats that was so different to what made Afrobeats great in the very first place. As I've established, I'm a music man. I love music. I can talk to you about Stevie Wonder. I could talk to you about Steve Lacy. I could talk to you about Amy Winehouse. I could talk to you about Stormzy. For me, albums are so integral and so important. I get the need to chase the number one. I've worked at a record label and I understand the pressures that come with being a signed artist. I get the desire to have a trending sound on TikTok. But for me, albums will always stand the test of time and will signpost an artist's contribution to music history. Remember at the start of this video when I spoke about Made in Lagos in such glowing terms? Do you remember that? Do you also remember when people were so angry that Burna Boy's album African Giant didn't win a Grammy, but the album Twice as Tall did? And that's because everybody collectively knew that African Giant was a moment in time. It was a reflection of what was happening in the world, and it was the prime example of life imitating art. And talking of art, you're going to like this through line. We need to talk about Work of Art by Asake. The quality of that album is quite literally reflected in its title, Work of Art. You don't call an album that unless you know that it is Premier League level work. Premier League, there's not UEFA. You don't call an album that unless you know in your heart that this album is a hit. And I've spoken about this on TikTok before and on Twitter as well. Asake's 2021 to 2023 run needs to be studied in universities, because in my entire life I have never seen anything like it. Never have, and I don't think I will ever see anything like it again, because literally every single thing that man released was a hit. Every single song a hit. How do you do that? And do you know what I really loved about Asake at that time, and I still love about him right now? He did it in this elegant style and confidence that was just so refreshing. He knew that he was that guy, and he was hungry. And that for me was the key point. Hunger. You see, these artists were making music because their lives depended on it. For a lot of these guys and girls, it was either music or nothing. That hunger and that level of drive can fuel you to create in ways that you can't even begin to imagine. And a lot of these guys were poor. They grew up in poverty. They didn't start off with private jets and millions of dollars at their disposal. Well, Davido did, but that's a separate issue. Actually, no. Tell a lie. Yes, Davido came from wealth and was extremely rich. But even then, his own dad did everything in his power to stop him from making music. His dad was so against Davido making music, but even he decided to show a level of diligence and hunger to pursue a career in music. And obviously, it's worked out for him. If you ever want to be inspired, I want you to go back and look at some of the old videos of Asake before he blew, because he was doing everything in his power to get that big break. Whether it was dancing, whether it was singing, whether it was acting, he was throwing himself to the art and waiting for something to stick. And when it stuck, boy, did it stick.
But since it's the only thing I'm good at, I would rather do it alone till it consumes me, rather than doing it for people to condemn it. See, it's a wasted talent.
Now, I'm not saying that Asake got comfortable, but it's like anything in life. Once you've achieved a certain level of success and a certain level of fame, and you've acquired a certain level of money, it's very hard to create from a place where you are no longer hungry. It's very hard to recreate that hunger that you had when you had nothing. And that metaphor actually perfectly depicts the current state of Afrobeats. Afrobeats music is suffering from its own success. You see, a lot of these artists are now 10, 11, 12 years into their careers. 15 years if you actually think about Wizkid. I was listening to Wizkid in 2010. So that's 15 years of just continuous music. And I'm not saying that they're putting out below standard albums, but it feels like it's just flatlined. It just feels like there's no innovation, there's no real evolution, and it all feels very much the same. Not only just that, but in following the money and trying to appeal to Western audiences, it inadvertently killed what made Afrobeats so good in the first place. It watered down the music. And I'm not saying that these artists shouldn't enjoy the fruits of their labor. Of course, I'm not saying that. I just think that the genre and Afrobeats as a whole is in need of a new lease of life, a reinvention, you know, something or somebody new to usher in a new era. And this could actually be a blessing in disguise. This could be a blessing in disguise, because the next artist from Nigeria or from Africa in general that gets it right and gets it perfectly right, they have the opportunity to skip the queue and establish themselves as the next global superstar. If you made it this far into the video, thank you very much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And if you love the video, make sure you leave a like, leave a comment, and of course subscribe. You can also listen to episodes of Small Talk on Spotify. The link is in the description. I will see you on the next video. Goodbye.